You've heard that it was said, love your enemy. Go back one more, just real quick. I was looking at 44 this week, actually late last night. I was just staring at 44. And I thought, I think that might be the gospel. I think that might be the whole gospel in one shot. Just try it out. Love your enemies. Bless people that curse you. Do good to those that hate you. Pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. That one verse would change the world. What if everybody in the world lived Matthew 5:44? They loved their enemies. They blessed people that cursed them. They did good to people that hated them. They prayed for the spitefully. I don't think we can quantify. I mean, everybody smiles when they think of that because you think, gosh, what a world that would be. That's the kingdom. When are we going to get to see that? The kingdom doesn't come by what you see. The kingdom comes by what you do. This is why we struggle. We go, well, if the kingdom's here, I ought to be seeing that. No! You don't see the kingdom, you live the kingdom. You've always supposed to have been living the kingdom. We've messed this up. For a long time, I wouldn't even preach on the kingdom because I didn't know how to answer that. Because people go, well, this is the kingdom, they're doing a poor job because there's still murderers out there and there's still rape and there's still war. And you go, man, that junk exists at the end of Revelation. At the end of Revelation, that junk exists. Outside of the New Jerusalem. The whoremonger and the faithless and the fearful are not allowed in. And yet the gates are open and there are leaves on the trees for the healings of the nations. And you go, well, why are the gates open? Maybe it's for all the whoremongers outside and the fearful and the unbelieving. Maybe it's because the kingdom is a person and a possession. And we're supposed to be loving our enemies, blessing those that curse us, doing good to those that hate us, and praying for those that spitefully use us, because they're always going to be there, and they're always waiting around outside of our gates. And maybe it's not that we need to be waiting on what we can see. It's that we need to be waiting to find a moment to see it in our own existence, in our own life. So let's close with this thought. Only the Judeo-Christian ethic. I think this is, to me, I think this is true. Only the Judeo-Christian ethic holds as a central tenet the equality of all men and the necessity to love others as its central ethic. Take, for instance, Jefferson's, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Why are these truths self-evident? Because we had this belief that people were created equal. Self-evident? No one had ever thought to write that down, by the way, in the history of the world. Ever. In the history of printed literature, no one had ever thought to put pen to paper and say, it is self-evident that men are created equal. How did it suddenly become self-evident? It didn't suddenly become self-evident. It had always been. We just forgot to bring it up as the most important thing about reality, is that people matter, all of them. Now, was there hypocrisy? Sure. Jefferson writes all men are created equal. He owned 600 slaves. There's always a hypocrisy in the people involved in some of the great principles of men. The only one you're going to absolve from that is Jesus. He's above that fray. You can't wait on people to nail the principles before we start to live the reality. So we've tried to live that reality in this country for a couple hundred years, that it's self-evident. And then the last sentence. I ran this one by Natasha because I said, I'm going to just throw one past you. Tell me what you think. I've worked and wrestled with stuff like this for a decade, that last sentence. If you view the main tenet of Christianity as living right, I dare say you've missed the heart of Jesus. Living right is not what Jesus came to teach you to do. Jesus came to teach you to love your enemies. You can go, no, Jesus came to teach us to love each other. No, don't cheapen it. Get more specific. It's easy to love people that love you. Don't water it down. Jesus came to teach you to love your enemies. You don't need help loving your kids. You don't need help loving your spouse. Some things you just buck up and do. Some things you do easy. But loving your enemies, that's impossible. You don't just buck up and love your enemies. You don't just go, well, I'm going to work on it. No, it's from something down here. It's a kingdom response. It's not just a reaction. It's a response. It's visceral. It comes from in the heart. Something that explodes. And something that happens, well, let me say it differently. Explode's the wrong word. I think it's something that can happen gradually because the kingdom's like a seed growing into a big tree. That's what we talked about last month. And so its tentacles sort of reach out in different areas of your life. Let's stop seeing the kingdom as what we can see, and let's start viewing the kingdom as a response mechanism. The ability to respond, because you have a kingdom response ability. We're going to work more on the kingdom next month and what it looks like from the lens of heaven on the earth, which is an important angle and one that you need both the Old and the New Testament to really explore and to really understand.